So here's the deal. The first day that Starfield came out, I played it for a little over 5 hours and was massively disappointed with a ton of different aspects of the game straight away. I was feeling some serious buyer's remorse, and I made a video where I broke down exactly what my criticisms were. Now, whenever I make videos like this, I naturally expect to receive some criticism myself. But unfortunately, none of the criticism that I got really had anything to do with the content of my critique. They were all fixated on one thing, the fact that I only got 5 hours into the game. Their major premise being that that wasn't enough time to fairly judge a game like Starfield. So after some time went by and I was able to reflect on this a little bit, I ultimately decided to give the game another chance, to find out if maybe my criticisms were premature, unwarranted, or maybe a bit too harsh, to see if the game really would turn around after the 20 or 30 hour mark like so many people were telling me. So I jumped back on that old horse and ended up spending about 70 hours playing the game, finishing the entire main storyline, doing some of the faction quests, random side quests, and a bunch of unguided exploration. And I have to admit, after all that time, after actually having some fun playing the game, that I was wrong about Starfield. Now, I wasn't wrong about how bad the writing, dialogue, quests, characters, or plot were. The quality of gameplay that I experienced in the first 5 hours ended up being an accurate reflection on the quality that I would experience over the next 65 hours. Now, what I was wrong about was just how much I underestimated the extent to which Bethesda phoned this one in completely, to levels uncharacteristic of even Bethesda. Now, back in August, I came across this video, which talked about some of the developer community drama related to Baldur's Gate 3's initial success, but at the time I honestly didn't really care about it that much. I admittedly only watched a few minutes of the video before getting bored and clicking off because generally this kind of drama is boring at best and at worst completely out of touch. But then, after actually investing time into Baldur's Gate 3, as well as Starfield, I've been trying to wrap my head around the existence of so many takes about this game that seem, to me at least, to be utterly incomprehensible. There were lots of things good and bad to say about Starfield, and I've been saying from the beginning, despite what people keep claiming, that these kinds of opinions are entirely subjective. But at the same time, I don't know in what universe any of some of the things that people are saying about Starfield could be considered remotely rational takes about the game. That so many people, as well as quote-unquote professional critics, gave the game a perfect score, saying things like Starfield is one of the most important games of our generation, that it proves Bethesda's the best at what they do, that the game was everything it needed to be and much more than we could have hoped for, the ultimate sci-fi game, that it's a monumental release that changes our perception of what the industry is capable of, or that it raises the bar for its genre and for the medium as a whole in countless ways. Now, in light of all that, after a few weeks go by, this video sneaks its way back into my recommendations. And taking another look at it with a bit of additional context and perspective this time around, the moment that I heard this, it all suddenly clicked.
But AAA game developers want you to know that this is rockstar level nonsense for scope, that it's foolhardy to set expectations higher, and Baldur's Gate 3 should not be used as a raised standard to RPGs going forward. Why was the first response to defend the current state of AAA gaming as opposed to saying, hey, maybe we can learn a thing or two from Baldur's Gate 3 and make our game better for our customers?
The rest of this video is going to be me doing just that, showcasing some of the best examples of how developers like Bethesda making games like Starfield should be paying very close attention to developers like Larian and actively trying to learn from what they've done with Baldur's Gate 3. And before anybody tries to argue that you're not allowed to compare these games because they're different genres or have different mechanics, the entire point of the remainder of this video is me explaining how what makes truly great games so great is completely independent of mechanics and transcends genre entirely. The essence of what makes Baldur's Gate 3 such an anomaly today is precisely the essence that's missing from Starfield, and the only way for me to explain how is to show you. So let's jump into it. Oh yeah, one last thing. There's no way to talk about either of these games in any meaningful detail without a bunch of spoilers, so consider yourself warned. Let's start off by talking about attention to detail and environmental storytelling, taking a look at one of the quests I had after joining one of the major factions as a space deputy. We meet up with a farmer who's being threatened by some soldiery-looking fellers wanting to buy her land, and then we inquire where they went, to which she responds,
"Back behind the house are some canyons. They went that way. That place is dangerous. Steep slopes, narrow trails, rock slides, and all manner of hostile creatures, too."
Alright then, sounds interesting. Things like treacherous terrain and rock slides aren't really common in these kinds of games, so that could make for a fun challenge. Now, after making our way to the first quest marker at the beginning of a trail, we come to this.
What is this?
A text pop-up? Is this a text-based adventure now?
Several pairs by the look. Not too old either.
Now let's ignore the fact that you can't even see the footprints here despite my graphics settings being maxed out. In what universe do they think in 2023, in a game rated mature 17+, that not only can they not trust that their players are smart enough to be able to look at the footprints in the mud and deduce their significance on our own, but also that they have to make it excruciatingly obvious by hovering a quest marker over it, having your companion also chime in telling us what we're looking at and why it's important, and requiring that we acknowledge our understanding of this critical piece of information not once, not twice, but at least 4 times by highlighting the footsteps and reading a text prompt indicating the direction the footsteps are telling us we should go. Now, of course, neither our companion nor the farmer happened to mention the landmines strewn throughout the canyon, which could have been a cool bit of flavor introduced any number of different ways, but naturally, the original warning we got about the treacherous terrain and the rock slides, as well as this.
Let's just hope they're not perched up on these canyon walls, waiting to snipe at us.
Were actually in reference to anything we'd ultimately experience. Now, on top of that, I'm not sure if the game's constant need to just straight up tell us the important and sometimes obvious information is because they think we're too stupid to figure anything out for ourselves, or it's because they were too lazy to bother conveying any of that information naturally in the world. Funnily enough, I was making this exact point live on stream as I was playing through this quest, and ended up making a joke about how absurd, but fitting it would have been for the game to have quest markers and text pop-ups for clues during the quest, and then to pat us on the backs for being so clever enough as to figure it out. And then this happened. Cool. I feel so fucking... Oh, my tracker skills. Holy shit. There's just so many more ways that they could have avoided making this quest as one-dimensional as it ended up being. Imagine if, after talking to the farmer, your partner mentions, I know these canyons well. Used to camp in here when I was a kid. These trails were notorious for people getting lost in, and there were always rumors about mines being left over from the old war. Watch your step. And also keep an eye out for anything that might give us a clue where these folks went. And then imagine that the canyons were actually even a mildly complex maze where you actually had to pay attention to your surroundings, fight some creatures while being sure to look for tracks, avoid stepping on any landmines that should have some sort of subtle visual indication, and maybe toss in something like the remnants of a temporary camp or maybe a short trail of discarded cigarette butts. And then imagine there was actually a rock slide somewhere, so the farmer's warnings were actually warnings, actual foreshadowing and not just meaningless filler dialogue. And then maybe as you get close, there are actually some soldiers up over the top of the ridge that you can fight. And because of that fight, your eyes are already going to be drawn up in that direction. Maybe there is where we can see some smoke coming from their camp that we could actually follow for the remaining parts of the canyon, ultimately to the destination. If they had just thought about it even a little bit, put in a modicum of effort into these quests, and didn't treat us like babies, these quests would actually be infinitely more fun and compelling. But instead, they're almost entirely the same copy-pasted experience where we fast travel to talk to some people, and fast travel somewhere else to kill some pirates and some big bugs, and then fast travel back to where we started to report the outcome. I genuinely felt as if nearly all of the quests I did, main storyline, faction quests, random side quests, they were all just disappointingly shallow. I was constantly told by different people who said that they loved Starfield that I wasn't playing it right, that I needed to do this quest line or join this faction or focus on the main story or don't bother with any quests or the story and just immerse myself in the exploration. But everywhere I looked, it was the same story. During character creation, I had chosen the wanted trait, and after fast traveling to our solar system, I got picked up randomly by the cops and taken in. And then after saying fuck the police and turning down their offer to turn state's evidence, knowing the penalty was jail time, I was actually interested in checking out Starfield's take on the whole jail minigame thing that they've done before, only to find out that they just didn't bother. I wasn't locked in a cell, I wasn't sent to the mines, I just fast-forwarded to my release like nothing happened. Now on the flip side, the extent to which Larian appears to have thought about every single painstaking detail is continuously mind-blowing, and it shows in all of the environmental storytelling, puzzles, quests, and more. On my first playthrough, without knowing anything about the characters or the kinds of things that they've included in this setting, I started to wonder if one of the members of my party, Astarion, might have been a vampire, because if anybody's giving off Edward Cullen vibes, it's this guy. But how I ultimately figured that out ended up being a chef's kiss moment. At one point during the adventure, I came across a dead animal that the game labeled as an exsanguinated boar, and after asking Astarion about it, he was actually the first person to bring up vampires. But of course the way he talks about them is as if he isn't one, so who knows? The more I started to think about different things, the more and more he became sus. But how could I possibly confirm it? I then remembered a little tidbit of trivia, and that's that vampires don't have reflections. But then I thought to myself, there's no way they thought of this. I immediately went to the nearest building, looked for a mirror on the wall, switched to Astarion, and used it.
I don't need a reflection to know this looks fabulous.
Now, of course, all of that, and I still wasn't expecting this the next time I went for a long rest. But luckily for me, one of the best things about this game is that none of the characters have plot armor. So, he fucked around and found out. In Baldur's Gate, you're constantly rewarded every step of the way for your curiosity, for your exploration, and for listening not only to what other characters are telling you, but also what the environment is telling you. While making my way through the Shadowlands, an area that's fallen to some kind of curse, I came across a random corpse, not something particularly uncommon throughout the game. I decided to see if I was able to use the spell Speak with the Dead on this particular corpse to see if it had anything interesting to say. Now, among a few random tidbits of information about who they were before they died and how they got there, we ultimately find out that they basically died from dehydration because they were surrounded by shadow mastiffs that were only held at bay with the use of torches that they had cast the spell Continual Flame on. Now, if you end up asking the right questions to the corpse, or if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons, you'd know that Continual Flame can't be extinguished. It can only be covered or hidden, and this explains why they were still burning. But then I thought to myself, why would they include this specific little bit of information here? Like, let's be honest, nobody would have questioned why the torches were still burning. There's no need to toss that much detail into something that wasn't important. Unless, of course, it was. Moments like this are everywhere throughout this game, and when you discover them, it genuinely feels so rewarding, like you managed to discover some hidden secret or solve a puzzle without having a solution spoon-fed to you. And what's most impressive is that so many of the moments like these are entirely unimportant in the grand scheme of the story. This is all completely optional side content. It's simply their way of filling the world with rich and diverse experiences. Now, it's moments like this that reward us for our curiosity, our experimentation, and our exploration. Everywhere you go, there's something interesting to interact with. You might pass by the same things 10 times and then on the 11th time think, I wonder why this is even here. And if you take a moment to look into it, boom, something new and unexpected. A few times earlier in the main quest, we were confronted and threatened by a mysterious alien-looking ship, but we never actually get a chance to really see them up close or directly interact with them at all. This is one of the biggest mysteries that the game has to offer. Who are these beings, where do they come from, and are they human? And at one point, while on a quest, I noticed one of their ships landing off in the distance, and I thought, oh shit, here's my chance to maybe see them and their ship up close. And so I opted to take the long walk to where they landed, hiding from them for now until I could get some more information from their ship, as I wasn't really sure if I'd be prepared to fight them on foot. Now, as soon as I got there, I've never been more underwhelmed in my life. Not only could I not interact with the ship in any way, it was also just kind of the lamest looking excuse for hyper-advanced alien future tech that I've ever seen. I mean, look at the door here. It looks exactly like the inside of the walls on the spaceship Earth ride at Walt Disney World. Now, there was actually one interesting thing about this interaction. Given that there was no way to interact with the ship that I could decipher at this point, I went with one of the only ways the game actually lets us interact with anything: shooting at it. And when I did, I heard a strange noise. And after trying it a few more times, it was honestly beginning to feel like it was responding to me. I tried to determine if there was some kind of pattern or rhyme or reason to this call and response, but nothing. I then tried different guns, but pretty much none of the ones I tried had the same result. And after a while, I ended up just giving up because I was making no progress. And then one of my mods had the idea that maybe it was related to the shell casing. As far as I can tell, what I experienced, the only remotely interesting thing about this entire interaction, one of the things I was the most excited about in my entire playthrough up to this point, was a bug related to how shell casings interact with this object, making it sound weird. And then, on my way back, the beings were nowhere to be found. Disappointment all around. Now, at the end of that mission I talked about with the farmer lady, we found out that the folks harassing her were in possession of a stolen spaceship, one that was stolen from this guy's company. During this conversation, we're given a bunch of different dialogue options that quite literally end up being pointless in every way. When asked why he didn't report the theft, forget about the fact that we really don't have any reason to care whether it was reported or not. He responds with some totally contrived backwards logic about how reporting it would make them susceptible to more theft in the future, and would make them somehow look weak to their customers, as if they'd care about that sort of thing. We then have questions about potential witnesses, motives, and about specific details about the ship, all of which net us no information. Now, we actually have evidence that it was an inside job from the slate that we collected from the ruffians that stole the ship, and when we ask him about it, not only does he reject the idea, but then he says he is going to look into it and he's going to tell us if he finds any evidence. And we're not given the opportunity to actually share the evidence that we do have. So none of that makes any sense at all. Now, one of his answers did include something that actually did pique my curiosity.
However, I can't deny there are times when the hangar is empty, so it's not inconceivable the thief could have slipped in unseen.
And this had me imagining that we were going to be tasked with maybe scouting around the warehouse, looking for some clues to point us in the right direction, but all of that was immediately rendered irrelevant when we were interrupted by one of his employees, who tells us that the ship was spotted landing in another city. So once again, we got to do no detective work, we did no problem solving, we had nothing to do with the critical plot shift here, it was literally just a scripted event after we had our time wasted by pointless dialogue. I'm beginning to think that the dialogue writers and the quest designers were given vague notes to work off of, but never actually got together in the same room to talk about how it was going to be put together, because all of this is just embarrassingly bad design. Not only were most of the quests I did completely bland and filled with constant hand-holding, but the ones that had any amount of complexity to them were either so convoluted to the point of being nonsensical, or were just so transparently contrived in all of the worst ways. The companions that we're forced to do these quests with also just happen to do all of the work for us most of the time, and are somehow omniscient in every situation. They always just happen to know exactly what's going on or what the outcome is going to be, and half the time they just tell us beforehand, removing any amount of mystery or suspense about what's to come. So I'm here asking this bartender for information about a missing person, and the guy seems reluctant to say what he knows. And Sarah just happens to immediately know that it's because the missing guy has an open tab, and the bartender's reluctant to give us any information because he doesn't know if the guy's coming back, rather than any number of other far more interesting possibilities, like this dude's holding him hostage in his basement, or he witnessed the space mafia kidnap the guy and they told him that if he told anybody what he saw, they'd kill his whole family, which would actually give this guy motivation to keep his mouth shut that makes sense. Because if you think about it, if the missing guy owes him money and we bring the missing guy back, doesn't that increase this guy's chances of actually getting his money? But I guess in this case it makes far more sense for him to go the extortion route rather than to be a good Samaritan. So naturally, we have just another case where we fast-traveled here to do nothing but watch our companion be smarter than us, to maybe have a chance at playing the persuasion minigame that's purely RNG, or very likely failing and being forced to pay a ransom, before we fast-travel somewhere else to do more of the same. Now, later on, we're trying to set up a meeting with somebody who has their hands on an artifact that we want to buy, and naturally it makes sense that this is going to take place in the VIP lounge of the most awkward strip club in the multiverse. Now, we're told the person that we're meeting is going to have an extra large briefcase and is going to be responding to a secret passphrase. And then, of course, the game just inexplicably fills the dance floor with generic NPCs holding shopping bags to try to make this quest oh so challenging for us. You basically just walk around trying to find the guy that they described until you realize that he's been over there the whole time, against the wall by the bar. But hey, at least we need to remember the passphrase, right? Well, no, of course they just make a mockery out of the first thing that we're actually able to do on our own. And then once we tell the guy where the meeting is going to be, we go back to Dad and he gives us a little pat on our back for being a good boy, for which we have 3 responses. The first option is basically, now what? The second option is to be a sociopath, and the third option is, well, I don't even really know. He seems cagey to me, angry even. Like, where is this coming from? It doesn't make any sense. Does this guy really seem cagey, let alone angry in any way?
Oh, really? I heard you all have a meeting in a few minutes, don't you? In one of those fancy VIP lounges? Speaking of which, I gotta get going myself. Excuse me.
And then, in preparation for the meeting, Boss Man shows us how clever and savvy he is by saying this.
Now, before we head in there, let me go over the ground rules.
What's the point of those
He'll
dialogue
ask for
options?
twice what we agreed on. That's normal.
And of course, just like he predicted.
I have the amount we agreed on.
Things have changed. I want double.
Now, how am I supposed to do that?
And then, after I refuse to give up any of my gear, and then basically say, come on bro, just take the money, the deal's done. Once again, there's never any kind of context clues or environmental storytelling. The player's just told what we need to think, what to feel, what we need to know, and what we need to do. It feels like so many of the quests that specifically require a companion were designed that way just so they could fill in the gaps in their design that would otherwise give players any semblance of agency or let us use our brains at all. It's just far easier to give the NPC some dialogue and have them do all the work. Now, before we move on, I want to quickly revisit a few points in this section of the quest, as I've actually had at least 2 different people tell me that this was one of their favorite quests because of the distinct and meaningful role-playing options allowing them to resolve the situation however they wanted to. First, rewinding a bit before this all went down, when Walter told us this.
Don't worry about the amount we actually settle on. The Stroud-Eklund Discretionary Fund is just a chip to you and me. Our goal is to get him to accept that chip in exchange for the artifact. Anything goes as long as it's in our hands, and we're not dead. How does that sound?
Alright, so it seems like there's 2 takeaways to keep in mind. Money doesn't matter, the artifact is the most important thing here, and anything goes. So far, it actually does sound like we're going to have some freedom to handle this how we want. Now, as soon as the negotiation starts, the thug says this.
Your security here going to stand or sit for this little meeting, making me nervous.
Interesting choice we're given. On my playthrough, I decided to sit, because honestly I figured they would only give us this option if refusing would cause problems. So I decided not to. But I do wonder if saying no would have triggered a different outcome. Let's see.
Flexing the muscles already, huh? Fine.
Alright, so the first choice we're given is effectively meaningless. What about the next stage in the negotiation? He says he won't accept the original deal and wants double. Walter says no, and then he asks if we're willing to give up a piece of our gear to make up the difference. Another interesting choice. Although, once again, it's not really a choice at all, given that the first option we have is to try to call his bluff. The second option is to literally say no, we can't just come up with more money out of nowhere, which completely ignores the fact that he literally just proposed an alternate solution that we were never actually given the option to accept. And then the final 2 choices we have are to grab the artifact, or to trigger the door to close remotely with the room's computer terminal that we hacked into earlier. Now let's also not forget the fact that Walter told us earlier that money was no issue, but of course the choice to actually pay double was never up to us. Walter just immediately dismissed it, and it never comes up again. Now at this point, we're given 2 different dialogue options that are functionally identical. They're effectively the same thing said 2 different ways, which is also reflected in the fact that they both lead to a back and forth between him and Walter before it's ultimately put back on you, giving you 2 more options on the right to either call his bluff or to appeal to reason. No matter what combination of any of those 4 dialogue options you select, the outcome won't change.
All right, you win. Hand over the money. This thing is all yours.
What about the other 2 options, choosing to grab the artifact and choosing to use the computer terminal to lock him in?
You trying to steal from me?
If you try to grab the artifact, well, you can't. All it does is trigger him yelling at you and giving you 3 ways to proceed. Either you tell him to walk away, you signal security, or you attack him. Let's look at the first 2 choices now and compare how differently they end.
As you can see, we're in control. Take advantage of our generosity. Take the money.
All right. Okay. It's all yours.
As you can see, we're in control. Take advantage of our generosity. Take the money.
All right. Okay. It's all yours.
So, another choice that wasn't actually a choice. The first 2 options just lead to Walter convincing the guy, and he says okay. We at least must be able to attack the guy, right? I mean, Walter said anything goes, remember?
What the? Security! So that's the play, huh?
No, it's not. We're not. We're not killing anyone. Here, your money. And we never want to see or hear from you again. Beating someone in a business deal is one thing. Killing someone is another. This isn't worth spilling blood over. Nothing is. I've never killed anyone over a business deal. I'm not starting today.
All right, it's all yours. Just tell your friend not to shoot me in the back on the way out.
It's not going to happen. Now get out of here.
I mean, let's be real. This entire sequence makes a mockery of the whole idea of choice. This quest, along with nearly everything like it in the game, is almost entirely the illusion of choice. You're never really given the option to do so many of the things they literally give you the option to do, despite the game seemingly leading you on, making you think you're going to be able to do them. Why does Walter tell us that money doesn't matter beforehand? It's never relevant to the entire negotiation. Why does he say anything goes, when clearly it doesn't? Why do they include the option to grab the artifact when you can't? Why do they include the option to attack him when you can't? Why does he get mad at you when he told you everything goes? None of this makes sense. It's all just so painfully badly designed and written. All I can think of when I see this kind of thing in this game is this.
The scope of the game, the amount of content we're making, is a bit more than we've done before in terms of quests and things like that, but the depth in some of this stuff with the dialogue, we just passed 250,000 lines, and so that's a lot of dialogue, but we've gone through it and the impact is really there.
Really, Todd? The depth of the dialogue? The impact is really there? Maybe part of the reason why Skyrim was just an exponentially better game than the other two on this list is because it wasn't trying so hard to pretend like it was giving us so many rich and diverse role-playing options when it comes to dialogue, instead leading into the role-playing aspect being more focused on gear and skills, rather than dialogue. And then your writers can spend less time writing hundreds of thousands of lines of bad dialogue, instead dedicating that time to telling the interesting story that's at the heart of the game in a remotely compelling or effective way. Now once again, let's take a look at Baldur's Gate. And once again, this isn't even a quest. It's just a random side encounter that began after I walked up on two guys talking outside of an old shrine. First of all, let's appreciate the dialogue, voice acting, and animations.
Ship! And the crypt can wait. Mari and Barton have been trying to break in for days. Now we... Stop! Got ourselves competition already. That's our ship.
Now, for people paying attention, we were given a couple subtle bits of information as we approached. There's apparently a crypt down there, and for whatever reason, they have been trying to break into it for days now. There must be something really important down there that we should be on the lookout for. Now, what about the options that were given to interact with this guy as we approach? Now, the first option we have is passive introduction, putting the ball in their court to see how they're going to react. We then have the option to persuade and deceive them, as well as multiple methods of intimidation, one unique to our class that also utilizes our intimidation skill, and the other unique to our race. Now, each of these has a different set of responses and potential outcomes, also depending on our skills added to the fate of the dice rolls. My first time playing through this, I was a human bard, but I rolled a critical failure with my persuasion attempt and ended up having to fight these guys. And because I had initiated the conversation like I did, I was actually at a pretty decent combat disadvantage, because all of my party was effectively standing right next to each other, right next to two enemies, and there were two ranged enemies that I didn't notice above us on the left and right outside of the frame. Because of a combination of bad luck and poor preparation, this ended up being quite a challenging fight for me at the time. Now, my second time playing through this, I was a rogue, and I was able to sneak most of my party into more tactically advantageous locations before shooting a rope that was holding a heavy object above one of these NPCs, which caused it to drop down, instantly killing one of them. And all of that preparation meant a much easier fight. Now, this time around, using my half-orc race as a means to intimidate them, I didn't even have to roll the dice at all. These guys just apparently don't want to fuck around with orcs, which honestly was something I didn't expect would work. I didn't even have to fight these guys at all, which ended up really coming in handy because I was kind of underleveled and I was playing on the hardest difficulty, which is honestly pretty damn difficult. Now, one last thing that I forgot about but wanted to throw in here last minute is that the decisions we make both in and out of dialogue actually impact how our companions feel about us in Baldur's Gate, and that ultimately has a massive impact on the story going forward. And it's also worth mentioning that unlike the major companions in Starfield that all literally have identical sets of morals and preferences regarding every major decision you make, and that you can't really ever go down a pure evil route in this game, Baldur's Gate's companion characters all have unique sets of complex moral and ethical stances. Their personalities, preferences, likes, and dislikes are, much like real people in the real world, nuanced and diverse, and, in many cases, are actually flexible as well, with the game giving you the opportunity to change their opinions on all kinds of different questions. And this also extends far into the evil side of things. from companions that are morally gray all the way to outright evil. Now, to go along with that, the game also provides you and allows you to choose the most degenerate, terrible decisions possible, resulting in you paying the costs associated with them as well as reaping the rewards, both tangibly as well as narratively. Now, between dialogue that gives us useful information about who, what, where, why, and when things are going on around us, giving us subtle hints or exposing secrets, as well as so many unique lines of well-written dialogue that are dynamic, based on our class, our race, the context of the situation, on our prior decisions, that is what makes this all so incredibly impactful and deep. That is what Todd Howard was dreaming of when he said what he did. This is what he envisions when he thinks about hundreds of lines of dialogue. The only problem is that in Starfield, it's all just a predetermined funnel to get you to whatever outcome they want for you. And at no point during the entire thing do they ever give you any kind of useful pieces of information that you'd actually have to use your head to make use of. They just tell you the answers like you're incapable of thinking or acting competently on your own. It's just so massively disappointing. This is just one more reason why I have to challenge the idea that you're not allowed to compare these games in any way. You hear it when Todd Howard talks about Starfield. He wants his game to have meaningful dialogue and impactful decision-making, but fails to deliver completely. And showing how well Larian approached the same challenge perfectly demonstrates how and why they failed.
You see a fella on his own on your way in. Dwarf. Balin's his name. Bald, blue tunic, dumb as a stick. My useless husband. Sent him for an errand. It's no surprise he's made a mess of it.
Okay, now back to that quest. Now, it doesn't take very long for us to find out that he actually stole the artifact from some powerful businessman, who effectively holds us hostage when he impounds our ship and then demands that we give him the artifact. So here we are, trapped in an elevator. How are we, the players, able to get ourselves out of such a sticky situation?
Oh, we're trapped.
Hello, Walter, dear, are you there?
Issa?
Took longer than I'd like, but I managed to pay off one of Slayton's security consultants. They've patched me in.
All right, we've got her out. Once the door's open, just follow her instructions, okay?
Well, that's convenient. Apparently even Walter's wife is more competent than we're ever allowed to be. Now let's ignore this dialogue option because if it wasn't written by Todd Howard's 11-year-old nephew, I'm going to have a stroke. His wife painstakingly navigates us through the entire facility, literally telling us every single step of the way, when to turn, jump, climb, when to stop moving, when to run to the next doorway, literally everything.
Drop down and follow the conduit all the way to the end, past the fork. There's a vent above you. Just climb up.
Is this supposed to be fucking exciting?
The room below you is clear. Drop down. Stop. One of the doors leads you right into the open. I'm unlocking a safe route. Opening the door on your right. Go now. Head left, but don't go through the door at the end yet.
What the fuck, man?
It's walking down the hall. Go now, straight across to the door. Keep going, all the way to the end.
Why is my grandmother walking me through like the Mission Impossible fucking infiltration? Tense music, too.
Another robot up ahead. Wait for it to pass, then head straight across to the maintenance door next to the security gate. Go now. Let me just get that for you. You know the routine. Up the vent. It's a short one, I promise.
So then that continues on for way too long until we make our way outside. At which point we fight 3 guards and it's effectively identical to every other fight we've had up until this point. What are you doing? What is this, the fucking happening? So like, here's the thing. So many people criticize the game and say it's bad because of all the bugs. But if I'm being honest, that's where most of my fun and enjoyment came from. All of the things that were never intended by the developers at all. And that's kind of what's so disappointing about this. That all of the stuff that they did put effort into, all of the intentional design, is just so laughably bad. Now, we eventually come to the final encounter with the scary business guy, and we're given the option to either fight the guy or say one of 2 things that both lead to the same outcome. Having Dad bail us out once again. Proposing some kind of vague business partnership, I guess, with the guy that just held us against our will and tried to have us killed. And then just when you thought the situation couldn't get any more contrived, Todd Howard says, "Hold my beer," because the ultimate solution to really hammering this awesome new partnership home is for him to give us the opportunity to decide the fate of his employee, the dude that we bought the artifact from initially. But like, why? I just can't make any sense of this entire situation other than they needed to give us something to forget about how we just spent 30 minutes taking orders from our grandparents and hopefully have us walking away from this quest as if we just experienced some serious ethical dilemma. But as is par for the course here, we don't really have any meaningful choice. We could go the route of killing the guy, but we have no reason to. He ended up being alright and we resolved the deal fine. And not only is there no clear reward for actually doing it, we have both of our companions trying to actively convince us not to go that route. And if we did, doing so would only hurt our reputation with them. So is this all really a choice at all? Now, the true beauty of Baldur's Gate is not only how many different ways you're able to solve different problems, how many interesting and unique situations you find yourself in, how many choices you're given to deal with them, and not only that each choice almost always has interesting and relatable role-playing implications, but also how so many of those choices actually have a significant impact on how the rest of the game is going to play out. So every choice is meaningful, it has weight. The game gives you so much freedom in how you want to tackle everything, big or small, from the dialogue options to the number of different ways that you can get access to that off-limits area, that locked chest, manipulate that troublesome NPC in a whole host of different ways to get them to do what you want, all the way up to whether or not basically every single NPC in the game, major or minor, lives or dies. Even from the most basic of interactions, like getting caught sneaking somewhere that we shouldn't be, or given the option to use deception, intimidation, or persuasion to try and talk our way out of it, or we can use an item that we previously looted to give us the ability to gain more insight into the situation, or we can assert ourselves as effectively this little Gerblin's master. Some of these options will lead to peaceful outcomes, and you can play the rest of the game without making enemies with any of these goblins that have taken over this little town. Now, if you happen to attempt any of those and fail, or willingly choose, you can deal with these situations with violence. Now, many times, some of these other options can lead to some really entertaining outcomes. Like the time I came across a small group of questionable travelers in the Shadowlands, with my initial introduction to them being a short cutscene with a goblin tricking a hyena into playing a fatal game of fetch. Now, I didn't take too kindly to that kind of behavior, and after tricking him into thinking I was basically his boss, I forced him to get a taste of his own medicine, ordering him to go fetch the bone himself, which had a predictable outcome.
I'll just go and, No.
Now, during a playthrough where I was role-playing as, let's just say, a not-so-good guy, I came across an altercation between a group of druids and a young tiefling child, who they had just caught stealing. Now, in every playthrough leading up to this, I was able to get the kid out of the sticky situation, but not on this playthrough. I decided to let it play out with them dealing with her however they planned, rather than myself playing the Good Samaritan, with that choice ultimately leading to her fearful escape attempt being swiftly ended when she was chased and bitten by the druid's pet snake, leading to the girl dying almost immediately. Something for which they chose to cover up, leaving me with the job of deciding if and how I was going to tell the worried parents of their daughter's fate. Then, not long after this, I attempted to steal a statue from the same druids during a ritual that they were attempting that would seal off their grove from the tiefling refugees outside. Now, this wasn't a quest or anything, I was literally just dicking around. And as you would expect by doing something stupid like this in front of a guard or a cop or whatever, there's going to be some kind of confrontation. But what I didn't realize was this fight would end up overflowing past the borders of the grove, leading to an all-out war between the druids and the tieflings, with literally all but 2 or 3 of the characters, including multiple major NPCs, dying in the process. This single decision made this particular playthrough massively different than any that I've done before or after. How about that moment that I stumbled across the vault room in a bank that I had snuck into, and realized that I had no idea what the combination could be as I basically skipped everything inside the bank as I made my way here. And right before giving up and leaving, I noticed a note sitting by the entrance listing some customer rules for the vault, with a temporary note attached at the bottom mentioning safety concerns related to water and electricity. And then I thought to myself, there's no way this could work, right? This is a good game. And then there was the time that I forgot that in this game, your actions have consequences. And despite it being a power fantasy in many ways, attempting to deceive a literal deity probably isn't a good idea.
Insolent fool! You wish to see godhood? I wish you to end.
And then, of course, there was the time that saying fuck you to another god, knowing full well that it would be my end, but doing so on principle alone, also ended with a predictable outcome.
You were made to conquer, to devour.
Oh god, I might just literally die.
You reject my blood, and so I will reclaim it.
Yep, I'm just dead. He, like, literally wasn't joking.
Who is worthy?
Until unexpectedly, out of nowhere, my hubris would ultimately become the key to my own salvation.
For one who can look upon Baal and oppose him can survive any crisis. So rise, challenger of gods, and prepare for battle once more. Death will not claim thee whilst I...
Or the moment when you discover what exactly is behind that barn door, making all that racket.
What the hell are you doing?
They were just fucking right over this guy's mangled corpse. Or how about the moment when you have to reject a vulnerable friend, as they put themselves out there, attempting to make your friendship something more than you're comfortable with?
I've been rehearsing, you know. I'd hate to put all that effort to waste. Oh. I mean, yes, of course. The sun only rests for so long.
I've never seen a man look so dejected in his life. How about the time you didn't screw around in the grove and actually managed to save both the druids and the tieflings from the goblin threat, and you accidentally make plans with 3 different people on the same night, and have to choose which one you want to be your active companion?
I have seen the Kithraki tear a screaming Neogi's legs from its belly to fashion into blades, yet they could not match your nerve today. It was enough to drive me to madness.
We should wait a little while, until the others have drifted off.
I'll come find you when the others have gone to bed. Wait up for me, all right?
Best not keep me waiting. I'd prefer not to entertain myself.
Gods, I want to ride you till you see stars.
You read an invitation in her eyes.
Kiss her. Yes, kiss Throm. Watch out for Throm teeth. Very sharp. Or you could save scum 3 times and do all 3. I'm seriously impressed with how many of the dialogue options Baldur's Gate gives you that are things I literally say out loud just before they pop up.
Approach! Ugly one!
What the fuck would you call me?
Ugly! Hideous! Vile!
That to me is the perfect indication of just how good the dialogue writers actually did in Baldur's Gate. How real and relatable all of the characters are, and how natural the conversations end up being as a result. Not to mention just how phenomenal every single one of the voice actors are, from the narrator and main characters all the way down to the least important NPCs.
Well, hello there, fans of me. I don't really know why you're asking me that question when the answer is blatantly obvious. She's red. She's strong. She's got a mouth like a dirty toilet.
I was looking for a friend. Maybe that could be you. Is an actual line that I remember doing.
I hate this place. I want to go to Build-A-Bear.
Well, the only thing I would say to you, Dan Allen, is that you are, and always will be, an Ishtik.
Friends, allies, to my side. Let us usher in a new dawn. This city is mine.
It's wizard time, mother. Fireball!
Perhaps it is not heroes we need. Only people who are willing to try.
Ha! In Baldur's Gate, you don't stuff the bear. The bear stuffs you. If you're lucky.
Just because I'm a vampire doesn't mean I'm evil. Well, a little bit.
Villainous face, meet virtuous fist. Why do we stop, my friend? There is evil somewhere with its small pants yet unsoiled.
His wife died too young. Grief tore through their home like a thief, snatching away the scent of her hair, the rustle of her skirts. But the man did not break.
And then you have Starfield.
Where's Barrett?
He's gone.
That's actually a joke. I don't think the voice acting in Starfield was particularly bad, but it also didn't stand out to me as particularly good. But I think I would probably blame the writers more than the voice actors in this case. I can't imagine it's easy to make bad dialogue sound good.
Nothing like a velocity after a rough shift at Xeno. Makes you forget how bad you stink.
And just like Baldur's Gate, Starfield had me constantly saying the lines that would end up showing up as dialogue, although for slightly different reasons. All too often, we're presented with dialogue options that are effectively an overt admission of self-awareness, that the dialogue writers know that the players are bored or uninterested in whatever's going on and just want to fucking move on.
All right, Adela. Deep breath. Oh, God.
Spit it out!
Right. Right.
It certainly is. Why, I might as well be back home with my husband. That man couldn't sit still and listen if his life depended on it. You'd think he could be bothered to pay me a visit once in a while, given I've been here as long as I have. But no. All I get is an occasional letter apologizing because he's too busy to run the farm all by himself.
Should we maybe, move things along here, ma'am?
It, knows it's fucking wasting my time. Think I can rule you out as my suspect? It would be genius if this whole annoying grandmother thing was a ruse.
I suppose that also means you don't want to talk to me anymore either? Well, go on then. Don't let me keep you. I thought the high and mighty Freestar Rangers were supposed to help
Shut
others
the
in
fuck
need.
up, lady! It's still so surprising to me just how many dialogue options there are in Starfield that only result in you just getting scolded by your companions. It literally feels like an idiot test, or that they're treating the players like a puppy with a shock collar and then trying to get them to bark.
You seriously trying to fleece me for credits? At a time like this? You've got a lot to learn about what it means to carry a badge, Deputy.
Nia's right. Rangers are the law, and need to wear the badge with honor.
That ain't for you to decide. I want you focused on the job at hand, not on a promotion.
The Rangers ain't like being a security guard. You earn your place among them.
I'd hate to be remembered as the wagoner who couldn't hold on to the farm that's been in the family for so long.
Excuse me, trainee, but we do not try to extort credits from the people we're protecting. If you have any more...
As far as I can tell, despite there generally being 3 or 4 response options available to choose from at any given point, the vast majority of the options are there solely to serve as generic and often interchangeable indications to the NPC that you want them to move on to their next predetermined line. Nearly all of the options, all the time, are so shallow that the narrative would effectively remain completely unchanged if you removed most of them entirely. I was briefly excited to use my Space Scoundrel trait for the first time, before realizing that all it meant was that I was going to be rude before telling her that I was a cop. So then I looked at the other options, which include saying I'm a new cop, I'm a cop that needs your help, and I'm a cop that's not going to steal your ship. Like, come on, are they really trying to pass these off as meaningful, impactful choices? If they are, that's pretty sad. And if they're not, then why bother? Having choices like these would have been far more interesting on basically every level. You have a few options. You can play the deputy card, providing her justification for why a random stranger just showed up on her ship after she was attacked, and then try to figure out if she's okay and what happened here, emphasizing that her well-being is your major concern here. You can play the Space Scoundrel card, giving kind of a questionable, shady justification for why you're here, while also indicating that you're savvy to the situation, no stranger to these kinds of happenings in space, adding some legitimacy to what ultimately ends up being your proposition. You help me, I help you. I'm not a bad guy with bad intentions, but I am looking out for number one. And lastly, you could go the intimidation route, pointing out how precarious her current situation is as a thinly veiled threat, basically putting the ball in her court. She gives you the information you want, nobody gets hurt, and you don't have to go out of your way to do any favors for her. And if she refuses, well, it's not going to end very well for her. But that, of course, isn't going to make your companion very happy, but will net you some decent loot, as well as a new ship to add to your fleet. Perhaps a worthwhile trade-off. Now, you came here for information, she wasn't willing to provide it, so we're going to have to sort that out another way. Perhaps when you loot her, she's got a notebook in her inventory that has some notes jotted down about some cases she's working on, including information related to the whereabouts of the person you're looking for. Or maybe that information is on a computer terminal nearby. There's so many ways to make even a simple scenario like this way more interesting. And with a few dialogue options that anybody spends more than 30 seconds thinking about, you're actually giving players the opportunity to play their roles in ways that make sense, to tackle different situations in different ways, and to have some amount of agency over what's actually happening in the story, which we don't have most of the time, as all we're doing is fast traveling, talking to people, and then fast traveling, and then killing some pirates, and then fast traveling and going to talk to more people, with none of what we choose to say to these people having any bearing on the outcome. Very rarely do any of these options actually lead to anything that feels remotely like a conversation. They're all just constant reminders that we're playing a game and that we just need to move on with the game stuff, rather than what the game should be using these moments to do. Immerse us with compelling characters in an interesting world, with crazy stuff going on around us that we're supposed to care about. Now, remember how contrived and convoluted that last quest that we talked about was? Well, before we move on, I need to walk you through an example of something infinitely worse. And it just so happens to be one of the most crucial quests in the entire main storyline. The quest that is effectively the key to solving the literal mystery of a multiverse. And man, is this quest a doozy. So we find out about something called the Unity, naturally through one of the characters just straight up telling us. But the problem is we have no information about what that means or what it is. But luckily for us, little Billy here thinks that his Sunday school teacher knows exactly what that means. So we head on over to his church full of space weirdos to get some answers. We think your church is connected to a group of space weirdos.
What? That's, what we mean is we think there's something in the Sanctum's teachings connected to what we've been investigating. Keeper, when you talk about unity, well, does it mean anything else? Something secret?
Perhaps you should talk about this inside.
Tell me about Dianetics. Is this where I learn about Dianetics? Okay, so L. Ron Hubbard tells us an old myth about a pilgrim, one that explored all over space and apparently found the, quote, true meaning of unity. Well, hey, that's convenient. That's exactly what we're looking for. And so what the pilgrim did is he went to two specific places, the House of Enlightenment and the Church of Varun, basically the secular humanist headquarters and the Vatican. And he, quote, gave them each a part of the truth. Once again, that's exactly what we need. Fuck yeah. Now after this, the pilgrim just lived out the rest of his days just chilling, thinking about something called the infinite, holy fuck, which basically translates to his personal contribution to the infinite. Well, that's a nice little parable, eh? Although I'm not really sure what to do with that information. Well, luckily, Elron has an idea. What if it's not some silly myth? What if it's actually a code? A code for finding where the pilgrim is buried. I mean, yeah, that tracks. And what's also really fortunate is that the people who write the dialogue for our character also had a great idea. That all of this information is of course useless unless we get literal coordinates. I mean, shit, that makes sense. Elrond likes that idea too. That's of course the only reasonable conclusion. So we have a couple of goals. The first is to find the House of Enlightenment. Perhaps traveling to a distant, exotic planet on the other side of the galaxy, completing the 17-step ritual of initiation until we ascend to... Oh. Well, apparently their HQ is on the other side of town, so we'll take the train. Alright, so when we get there, we talk to the first dude we see, and he tells us all about how cool atheism is, and also happens to know about their version of the Pilgrim story, which he then tells us, and it's obvious that there's a clear emphasis on the number 2. Like he mentions 2 so many times that even our character hates it. Great, so we have our first clue. The number 2. Now for the real test. We need to find the enigmatic House Varun. Legend has it that we'll need to infiltrate their secret base and make a sacrifice during the Blood Moon ritual. Oh. I guess it just makes more sense that we go around the corner to the local jail where some religious chick is. Rumor has it that she went to worship camp at House Varun every summer. So what's she got to say? First, she tells us about the cosmic serpent that they worship. Kinky. But then we find out that she already told Elrond what she's about to tell us. So why the fuck? According to the legend of House Varun, their version of Jesus gets accosted by an unbeliever. And naturally, Space Jesus instantly cuts down the infidel. But alas, the unbeliever returns 4 times over the course of 120 rotations of the planet. Now luckily for us, the unbeliever's really super adamant to remind Space Jesus not to forget about the 4 battles and the 120 rotations, just before he gets cut down one last time for good measure. So obviously, we have everything we need at this point. Now let's make the treacherous journey back to Scientology headquarters. Like, why do they have me do things that have no purpose?
This place always surprises me.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello there.
And then we'll have to sit down with a pencil and paper and really try to decipher the riddle. Oh. He just tells us the answer? Wait. That's the answer? Holy f...
If there really is a location the Pilgrim wanted us to find, those do sound awfully like coordinates. Planets are often named by number. That second might mean the second planet in the system. Yes. What he added to infinity. Maybe that points to a name. If we're looking for his resting place, we'd need to know the name of the star system, wouldn't we? Let's see. We have something that could be coordinates. Something that could point to a planet in the system. But what's the name of the system? Infinitum addendum. What if we break down the parts? No systems named finite or add. That just leaves in and dumb. Well, that's certainly how I feel. Well, I suppose that'll make someone laugh.
I mean, what am I supposed to say? Do I have to say anything? That entire thing just played out like the worst episode of The Curse of Oak Island. Not only does none of this make sense, but we also fucking did nothing the entire time. We talked to a guy that gave us a bunch of boring information, and then he told us to go talk to 2 people in boring locations to give us more boring information. And just like the vast majority of the other quests, going from point A to point B, there's never anything fucking interesting or meaningful in between. When you get there, they waste your time with shitty dialogue, you come back, tell the boss what happened, and then he does all the work for you. Every single one of the elements that I've described that makes Baldur's Gate so great, there's no reason why those concepts couldn't have been applied in Starfield. These aren't game design principles that are unique to turn-based D&D games. These are just basic principles of game design and storytelling. That is why I reject the criticism from people saying I'm not allowed to make these kinds of comparisons. It's just nonsense. If they had taken just 10% of the game design principles that Larian applied in Baldur's Gate, a lot of the principles that they actually had in a lot of their previous games, games that we all fell in love with, as imperfect as they were, I think I'd probably love the game. It's not that every element of the game is terrible, it's just that none of it is great. Everywhere I look, all I see are missed opportunities at making something amazing. It just feels so soulless everywhere. You can say I had unrealistic expectations all you want, that's fine. But what I really wanted was just a little taste of what they gave us in that initial teaser trailer, that to this day still gives me chills. Alright, one last thing I've got to add here at the very last minute. I just started playing Cyberpunk for the first time on stream a day before this video is going to get released. And I have to say, after only 5 hours of playing this game, I can already tell it's going to be incredible. The voice acting, the animations, the graphics, the music, the story, the way they handle cinematic moments as interactive gameplay combined with dialogue. Honestly, it's one of the most immersive games I've played in a very long time. It's phenomenal. All of this footage I'm showing is from the first few hours of my gameplay tonight. None of it is cinematic or taken from trailers or anything like that, and everything you see is effectively from the goddamn tutorial. If you want to see more of this after this video comes out, come by my stream. I'm live pretty much every day. Enjoy.
Slow, deep breaths. Your cortisol and adrenaline spiked, but the soft activated your hormone blockers. Nothing happened. You're alive and well.
Hey,
You all right?
never been better.
You're late!
Love it when you're mad. Gets my southern blood pumping.
Get in, or I change my mind.
Hey, Gramps. I know you. Let's see. 誰のことも許す必要はない。
Well, shit. Goes for you, too. So what you think?
Brick got it. I don't see any fucking brick around here, do you? You short, Cirque? Bang.
Bring it, cocksuckers! I got some I ain't let
She shot it with thimbles, she thought it with care. Pursued it with forks and hope.
Johnny, payload.
Reloading!
Closing in on the access point.
Slide in. Sweet icebreaker.
Far too many people also seem to be confused about something that should be painfully obvious. The reason why many of us were disappointed when we found out that you can't walk seamlessly around a planet or fly into gas giants is not because we wanted to spend hours literally walking around a planet, or because we think that we should be able to walk on the surface of gas giants. It's because the absence of features like that are actually indicative of the nature of exploration in the game. It reveals that our reasonable and realistic hopes about the open world nature of the game that we were actually sold on weren't true. Learning about being unable to truly travel for any major distance on foot without hitting an invisible wall really did expose what we'd ultimately find out about their open world exploration philosophy. And learning that you can't fly into gas giants really was indicative of what we'd eventually find out when it came to space exploration in the game. Now in Skyrim, you see that mountain over there, you can climb it. In Starfield, you see that mountain over there. Well, if it's past the boundary of the current slice of the planet you're standing on, you can never climb it, because it doesn't really exist. The procedural generation of the adjacent tile will produce an entirely new landscape with the same general biome type, but for all intents and purposes, it's just randomly generated before it's done loading after you fast travel to it. Also, don't forget that not only can you actually go to that mountain in Skyrim, there's actually things to do and see between here and the mountain. Bethesda described their game as one where we can explore with unparalleled freedom. Unparalleled freedom. And yet it has arguably the most shallow and restrictive exploration of any modern game they've made, not to mention any of the other open world games from the last few decades. Saying our expectations were unreasonable, and that was the problem, is not only gaslighting a massive portion of the community, but it's also ignoring the real issue that we should be discussing. The focus actually needs to be on what we know they were capable of doing, the way in which they spoke about and marketed their game, knowing full well what our expectations were, all in the context of ultimately what the experience was actually going to be in the end, that they knew. When Todd Howard says this,
"That isn't just a backdrop. That moon is actually there orbiting the planet. Yes, you can visit it too."
Anybody with a brain knows what we all took away from that. The picture that he's painting here eerily mirrors what we all heard way back in the days of VGX 2013 and E3 2014, when we all learned about being able to take off from the surface of a planet, fly towards another planet that we see in the sky seamlessly until you touch down on the other planet's surface. It's like Todd Howard saw what happened with the initial release of No Man's Sky, all of the undelivered promises and unfulfilled expectations, and said, "Hold my beer." The whole idea that what you see is all modeled, that it's all quote-unquote really there, that you can go there, is all completely and utterly empty and meaningless when not only can you not actually fly directly there at all, but instead, the game is designed purposefully in such a way that the best way to get there involves zero piloting of a spaceship, as well as half a dozen menus, extended button presses, and loading screens. Call it what you want, but you're going to have your work cut out for you if you want to argue that that is exploration with unparalleled freedom.
And we are modeling all of the systems, because that's how we like to do things. So you can watch whatever that gas giant or moon, it will rotate and go, and sunrise, sunset, and all of those things that you would expect, and it's all really happening.
The way that Todd Howard talks about what they're doing in their game, it's as if they're doing what Outer Wilds actually does, modeling a full star system in real time. But not only did they not do anything remotely like that, they also had no need to, because it's all just pointlessly consuming processing power, because the same exact effect could be done with a dynamic skybox. Given that we're not actually going to be flying towards anything that we see in the sky, it just makes a lot more sense to basically fake it, and if done well, it would be indistinguishable. At the end of the day, this game is simply a sorry excuse for an open world game. With loading screens between buildings, between different areas within the same city, different areas within single buildings, between different areas on the surface of planets, and between planets and space. If Starfield is an open world game, then so is Super Mario.
But I think I have the matter well in hand. Thank you all the same for your concern.
I can't tell if he's kidding or not.
Maybe it's time I show you how we resolve disagreements here in Neon.
Now, the sequence of events that I experienced during my short time on Mars is a near-perfect encapsulation of what my entire experience playing Starfield was like. Right after finding out that there was no jail system in the game, but realizing that I had been transported to Mars, a place that I'm actually interested in checking out, I decide, okay, let's see what Mars has to offer me in terms of immersion.
Morning's fair word.
Look at this place. I can't imagine being cramped down here, choking on the fumes and the dust.
I want to talk to
No
you for a second.
trees, no grass.
Some friends of mine heard how you handled Sis stuff. They, want a word.
One of the major issues plaguing this game that makes it impossible to stay immersed are the 500 things that are all constantly happening at once, vying for your attention at any given time. Your main companion is always just randomly talking to you about something at the worst times. NPCs around you are constantly saying random uninteresting things that the game then feels the need to have to subtitle, which then overrides any of the subtitles of what your companion is saying. Then there's radio transmissions, environmental effects like explosions or announcements over the intercom, not to mention how all of that overlaps when you're on your ship and then suddenly get locked into encounters with other ships, cargo scans from the authorities, etc. They basically spent zero time ensuring that there's any kind of prioritization of stimulus going on. They never queue up dialogue until after an event occurs or anything of the sort. It's all just one giant overlapping mess.
Cora, we're back.
Mayday! This is Freestar Ranger Nia Kalu. If anyone is hearing this, systems failing. How you doing, Sweet Pea?
I repeat,
well,
need help.
Okay.
Welcome to Free
But
Stuff
it'd
Space.
be a lot better
Quick
if...
scan for contraband.
I guess it'd be a lot
Shut the
better
fuck up!
if you had a bigger book allowance.
You're good to go.
You know me
All
so
clear to land
well,
in
Dad.
Hometown.
So, what do you...
Alright, so back to Mars. I then decided to see what I could find off the beaten path that might be interesting. What kind of depth they put into the world. Now, the first interesting thing I come across is a kid, which actually reminded me of one of my favorite subtle little details in Skyrim that's stuck with me for over a decade since I noticed it for the first time. Right after Ralof mentions how the Imperial walls used to make him feel safe as a kid, we actually see a kid named Haming asking his father Torolf what's going on. Obviously not wanting his small son to witness an execution, he tells him, "You need to go inside, little cub, inside the house, now." Now, given that there were no kids in the prior Elder Scrolls game, Oblivion, this was actually a really interesting moment, especially given the context of the situation. And it only got more interesting a few moments later, after the dragon attacks during the Helgen escape sequence. Depending on your timing coming down through the burning house and how closely you're paying attention, you'll see the child standing over his injured father, before Hadvar yells at him to get to safety. But if you listen closely, as his son is running away, you can hear Torolf say, "I'm finished, little cub. Run for it." With the last words he says to his son as he runs to safety being, "Make me proud," just before the dragon comes down and turns his father to ash. That right there is how you use a child character effectively in a story. So almost immediately after seeing this child here, I was thinking, this could be interesting. But then, given the context of the situation, the second thing that came to mind was, under literally any circumstances in the real world, my walking into a random apartment complex and stirring up conversation with a child sitting alone in a hallway, this would be entirely inappropriate and exceptionally creepy. But hey, I'll suspend my disbelief for now and see what happens. So it sounds like his mom is dealing with some depression and/or substance abuse issues, and I'm a total sucker in games like this for helping out an innocent person in need. Let's just ignore the fact that a random creepy man in a spacesuit just rolled into your apartment uninvited. Instead, she seems to acknowledge that this is just normal for them, I guess. The kid's always just inviting strangers in to talk to their sad mom. That's normal. And then, of course, having her explain her situation to me was more of the same. Just really fucking weird. It's crazy to think how awkward and alien most of these interactions feel in this game when it's almost exclusively human-to-human interaction in much more of a relatable setting and in fairly familiar situations. And yet the game is so much less immersive and believable than when you're interacting with wizards and cat people in Skyrim. A much less relatable and familiar fantasy setting. I mean, hell, even this interaction in Baldur's Gate, one intentionally meant to be surreal and humorous, a conversation with a literal cat, feels so much less alien.
It was another day in the City of Lies, Baldur's Gate, where the people begged for justice until they starved. Two heroes were fated to cross paths that day. Their eyes met. Destiny was calling. Strangers? Only in a fool's definition of the word. It was the start of something incredible. Two heroes on the hunt for justice. No matter the cost, all the Tall One had to do was say yes. The Tall One had failed the first test. They lacked caution.
Compared to when I'm talking to a mother and their child about their daily lives.
I live here in the condos. Sorry, I don't usually talk to strangers, and I don't know. I guess I'm thinking about lots of different things right now.
Don't tell me my son Tai invited another stranger to come talk to me again, did he?
Was that a yawn? Do you have a... Are you fucking dying?
Thank you from the Sidonia Department of Public
What's going on? She's like, like she's been shot.
I asked my mom what they were, but she says it was something to do with drinking. And I've never gotten sad after drinking water, so I don't know what's going on.
And then, after exhausting all of the dialogue options available to me, she says,
I just wish I could do more for him. Thanks for the chat.
Well, that's it?
Oh, welcome back.
And the conversation ends. Now, to be fair, I have to give them credit where credit is due. They get bonus points here because they managed to sneak in the first bit of really great environmental storytelling that I had noticed in my entire playthrough. I'm genuinely impressed that they thought of including a hidden stash of booze that's typical of alcoholics. But then the fact that I couldn't use that as an impetus to confront her about her problem and to try to help her family out is just kind of negates the whole thing, unfortunately. This right here is about as far as I was able to get in my attempt to do so. So for some reason, the game spends all of that time telling me about their serious struggles in an unfortunate situation, which in many ways is one of the most relatable things so far in the entire game, reflecting real socioeconomic issues that people are actually facing. And then just well, thanks for the chat, and it goes literally nowhere. Do I get to persuade, bribe, or threaten somebody in a nearby store to get them to hire this lady? Was I given the option to subsidize her substance abuse treatment costs? Did I get the option to fly her back to New Atlantis to work as a secretary for Constellation, with her son and Sam's daughter becoming best friends on the ship in the process? Like anything at all? No. Nothing. I exhausted every single dialogue option. I wasn't asked any questions or given any choices. Just one more disappointingly shallow experience where there was actually so much potential. I then make my way to another floor and see another kid just sitting out in the hallway. I guess this is just what they do around here.
Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm so bored. My mom and dad
Same, dude.
People I don't know.
Same.
So...
Maybe we can help each other.
Maybe I could talk to you, and I know you, and I won't be so bored.
Now, after talking with this kid for some time, they tell me all about this character they created called Space Frog that they love to make drawings of. And because I guess on Mars there's just not that many kids around, it really brightens up the days of all of their mom's friends whenever they get a chance to see Space Frog. I bet Tae's mom is going to be inspired to turn her life around after she sees that picture of Space Frog on the wall of the public bathroom. Now at this point, I'm thinking that my little off-the-beaten-path change of pace was a giant mistake. I decide I'm going to give this little city on Mars one last chance. So I head on over to a different part of the area, making my way over to this lady, who mentions something that actually does pique my interest, something she calls the Heart of Mars. She tells me all about a nearby cave that's become something of an urban legend, inside of which it's rumored that there's some kind of super valuable titanium deposit, but the problem is apparently that it's really dangerous. Apparently lots of people have gone there and nobody's ever come back. That maybe the cave is cursed or there's some scary monsters in there or something, who knows. Fucking finally something I can sink my teeth into. She gives me the coordinates to the cave and sends me on my way. Then, taking a page out of Diablo 4's book, they let me fast travel right to the cave. Well, I mean, of course not into the cave because that'd be too convenient. Instead, I get sent to right outside the cave, so I need to walk another 50 feet to the entrance and then hit another loading screen. At which point, I find myself inside of a cave that looks like it was designed by the same people who made that Christmas claymation movie. I can almost immediately see the quest marker like 30 feet in front of me that's just straight up sitting on this random uninteresting chunk of rock. And of course, they couldn't have made this area look even remotely interesting, or maybe even let me search for it myself. They just point me right to it. Now, after mining it, I'm thinking, for about the 100th time already in my playthrough, that this can't be it. There has to be more to this. And I even said, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, assume that there's something interesting inside the cave deeper, even though I could have just left. There's no enemies, there's no traps, there's no monsters, there's no aliens. There's just nothing else to do or see here. That was it. The quest is called The Heart of Mars, and I went into an empty cave and picked up a boring rock. After making my way back to the NPC who gave me the quest, she says this.
Oh, I'm beat. What? Hold on. You're telling me you actually found the Heart of Mars? It's supposed to be a harmless prank we send newbies to go find. It's not supposed to actually exist. Yet, here it is.
Like, what? What kind of stupid fucking prank is making somebody go search a cave for nothing? That's the kind of shit that little kids do, telling their other little friends about the chupacabra that's in their backyards, not adults living in a world where going outside can actually kill you. Like, holy shit, now that I think about it, imagine if little Tae from the apartments was the one that actually told us about this myth. that he wanted to go find the Heart of Mars himself so that he could sell it and pay for his mother and him to get off this rock and start their life fresh somewhere else much nicer. But obviously his mom won't let him go because it's way too dangerous. Maybe his mom comes out, sees him talking to some strange adult and says, whoa, kid, you really gotta stop talking to strangers all the time. Get inside this house right now. And as he goes inside, out of his pocket falls a little hand-drawn map that shows the coordinates to the cave. Then when you actually go to the cave, you see it filled with like human bones and old ratty spacesuits. Eventually finding some crazy cannibal space hobo dude that tries to kill you, and after you manage to kill him, maybe he's got some cool unique item on him, and then you can take the Heart of Mars, choosing to keep it for yourself and sell it for your own profit, or you can head back to the family, give it to them, helping them get out of this shithole. Boom, 2 birds with 1 stone. You've now just made the Heart of Mars and this whole interaction with Tae and his family actually make sense and be infinitely more compelling. And then the explanation that she comes up with to justify the whole thing is that she must have given me the wrong coordinates. What? So now I'm supposed to believe that she messed up, gave me some random coordinates that just so happened to lead directly to a cave with a big chunk of titanium, the thing that she said would be there? Are they trying to say this whole thing was just a giant coincidence? Like, who the fuck comes up with this dumpster fire of a plot? Now, I actually have a theory for how this could have been a hint at another cave that actually has the real Heart of Mars in it, but explaining how unlikely that is, given how it would be next to impossible to find our way back there, given how the fast travel system works, all of that would just take way too long to explain. And there's virtually no chance that Bethesda thought that much about it anyway. And listen, I get it. Lots of people literally just turn their brains off and don't pay attention to any of these kinds of details. They don't experience the cognitive dissonance, and that's fine. I too love me some mindless gaming every now and then. But at the same time, don't tell me that I'm being unreasonable for being amazed at how god-awful the writing and quest design is here. Like, I would literally have to go out of my way to come up with something that's this incoherent. It's easier to make something that makes sense that's mediocre than it is to make something that's this bad and incoherent. Quests can be designed to do lots of different things. They can make you laugh, make you scared, make you nervous, make you cry, require that you use your brain to solve a problem, challenge you in some other way, whether it's combat or ethical decisions. They can wow you with stunning audio and visuals. They can give you a sick fucking reward at the end. Now, it's exceedingly rare that any one quest does all of these at once, but it's even rarer in my experience that any one quest can be designed with literally none of these. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say that there's no passion, no effort, no soul, and that I think it's badly designed. Now, whenever I've talked about the quest issues in Starfield, a few folks have responded by pointing to Skyrim as having really bad or basic fetch and kill quests too. But I have 2 responses to that. The first is that these super basic quests in Skyrim, where you're just going from point A to point B, they actually serve a critical purpose. Because when you're actually traveling on foot through the world, they design the areas in between specifically to have all kinds of experiences along the way, whether that's basic hunting and raiding bandit camps or bear caves, to coming across small towns with shops and maybe a quest or 2 to get involved with. The simple quests act as a tool to direct players throughout the world that they otherwise might not visit, as well as funneling them towards more interesting handcrafted content that they've made. The simple fetch quest itself in isolation could be argued to be boring, but everything you end up doing from start to finish in between is nothing of the sort. That's one of the major reasons that so many Bethesda games like Skyrim feel so alive and immersive, even in the face of all of their Bethesda bullshit. In my experience playing Starfield, I never got anything like that. There was no immersive exploration in between this city and the cave. You just fast travel there and you fast travel back. All of these terribly designed basic quests, coupled with their fast travel system, results in so much of the game feeling like it has all of the problems of bad quest design without any of the benefits of an immersive, freely travelable open world filled with interesting content everywhere in between. Now, the second response I have is that Skyrim actually did have some pretty incredible quests with really interesting lore, tons of environmental storytelling, and lots of genuinely compelling moral and ethical decisions. It's impossible to play through Skyrim without experiencing a ton of really great quests, whether you like all of them or not. And you're also rewarded a bunch for exploring around and immersing yourself in the world, as there's just a ton of fantastic side content hidden throughout the game. I'm not going to go into them now, but if you want some more concrete examples, I'd recommend checking out this video by Gingy about why Skyrim has remained so popular and so replayable for so long. It has an entire 20-minute section about the best side quests in the game, and they mirror my thoughts exactly. Now, I'm sure that I missed some of Starfield's great quests. It'd be impossible for them not to have at least a few great ones in there. But that doesn't change the fact that almost every single quest I experienced in my 70 hours of gameplay wasn't even a fraction as good as even some of the least memorable Skyrim quests. I even went so far as to try to watch a few videos on Starfield's best quests to see if any would stand out to me. And while a couple did actually seem interesting, the fact that multiple videos included quests that I considered utterly terrible amongst their list of the game's best quests doesn't exactly make me think that I've been missing out on a whole lot.
She'll ask you to put up 6 of these space frog drawings for her around Cydonia. Follow the quest markers to place each one, and return to her to receive a whopping 12 credits, plus your brand new outpost decoration.
Now, there was actually one quest that stood out to me in Starfield that was oh so close to being incredible. The Entangled quest is one of the later main storyline quests that begins after you receive a distress signal from a satellite, and once you go aboard to help, you realize that nobody there needs help. Now, as you're escorted on your way back to talk to somebody in charge, boom, you're suddenly taken somewhere completely different. Somewhere that quickly becomes clear is a disgusting, awful parallel universe version of the satellite that you're currently on. And as you repeatedly phase back and forth between each reality, you're slowly able to piece together the story of what happened here, ultimately leading to multiple distinct, and I would argue fairly meaningful endings based on how you interpret what's going on and what you ultimately decide to do. Now, the most interesting part of this quest, in my opinion, was the sort of spatial navigation puzzle at the heart of it, needing to figure out where to go to accomplish whatever mini-task that you needed to do in the moment, both in terms of location on the satellite, but also which universe you need to be in to be able to accomplish whatever that goal is. This extra-dimensional pathing puzzle was really fun, for a while, although I do also have to mention that towards the end I feel like it overstayed its welcome. The quest just dragged and dragged and dragged. I ended up getting stuck in a few places, and in one spot I couldn't find any logical solution to the puzzle, and after basically just trying to blindly brute force my way through it because I couldn't see any rhyme or reason to this one particular aspect of it, despite logicking my way through almost all of it, with one part just seeming to not have a solution. I had taken every path or passageway that I could find, every portal in either universe, but I must have just missed something somewhere for whatever reason. I literally just ended up no-clipping through the wall to skip this one particular section, because I was too annoyed with what I couldn't be sure wasn't a bug and didn't want to waste any more time. This quest was the one and only quest that I can recall that used any kind of interesting puzzle or unique mechanic, and I wish they had done a lot more to spice up the main quest line, arguably where they should have put their best foot forward with the best, most compelling, exciting, and interesting quests. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the one thing that I think disappointed me the most about Starfield. Something that all of my favorite games, including so many of Bethesda's own previous titles, did well. Its complete and utter inability to elicit any of the emotions that they were undoubtedly going for. I was genuinely excited to learn about the mysteries at the heart of Starfield. I mean, how many of you guys saw the initial teaser trailer? It was fucking epic. Even watching it now still gives me chills.
That's why we're here.
Main engines go. Ignition.
To discover what's out there.
Good luck, Constellation. You are go for launch.
So, how does the game deliver on giving us one of our first glimpses into the mysteries of their universe, the moment where we meet the mysterious primary antagonist of the entire game?
All in all, a great success. Thank you for allowing me to tag along with Constellation's newest star. Yes, I used a pun. Forgive me.
Exploring the galaxy is hard. No rhymes are smooth. It's not my exhausting. Let's talk. Just us adventurers, okay?
We're locking into orbit now.
You hold something you have no right to. My people have killed for this.
I'm not liking what I'm seeing on the scans. Energy output from that ship is far above the normal range. If we spin up the grav drive now, we have a chance. We'll get through this. Hold on.
Effectively, every moment in the game that should have been epic and memorable fell completely flat, like they didn't even care at all. For contrast, let me show you how Elite Dangerous, a game that's far more of a space simulation than it is a story-based, exploration-focused RPG, treats these kinds of moments. Now that is how you introduce a bad guy. Hell, for good measure, let me throw in just the audio for my playthrough of Outer Wilds because I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't played the game yet, because that's all I need to give you an example of the kind of experience that you can give players if you're able to introduce even fairly unimportant characters the right way at the right time. No, dude! No, bro! Are you fucking kidding me? Now forget about introducing characters. How about saying goodbye? Like the moment when you find out that your best friend, the character that you're closest with in Constellation, is dead.
Hey, Barrett. Barrett, can you hear me? It's Sam. He's gone. Come on. Let's get going. There's no changing anything now.
Vladimir! Oh, thank goodness. Where's Barrett?
He's gone. We need to talk locks and bolts.
Is mining on the schedule today? You look well.
How about the moments leading up to the final epic boss fight of the game? The beginnings of the climax of the entire story. The fate of everything you've worked for up until now, hanging in the balance.
A fight in the heavens themselves. What more could we ask for?
Wait, where'd he go? Wait, did he just bounce? He just left? Alright. How about a minute later, the final stretch to the final boss fight of the game? What's with the stains on the ground? Oh, who knows, dude. Gotta love the epic music, too. Like, the build-up. Lots of folks have and will continue to criticize me for nitpicking, and that's fine. But I genuinely wonder if they can really be serious if they think that any amount of thought or effort went into these moments. The least they could do is put some music in the background. I mean, that's the cheapest and easiest way to get across whatever emotion that you want players to feel. But for some reason, they didn't even go that far, which really is a shame, considering so much of Starfield's music is actually good. You just never actually hear it in the game. Now, this boss fight in Baldur's Gate isn't even one of the main story fights, but it literally has its own song that makes the whole fight so epic. You don't even need to have met the characters at all. In this case, all you need is a random side character to make you promise them that you'll save their daughter's life from an underwater prison. And even within a turn-based game, you'll be emotionally invested in the outcome of the situation. Oh no!
Go! Run! I can make it.
Well, they can't! Oh no. What did we left 2 of them behind? Hell, the characters don't even have to be alive for you to feel something. Like when I was randomly poking around a cemetery and came across a crypt for somebody called the Houndmaster. After pilfering his tomb for a few gold pieces, I was attacked by a spirit and the spirits of the hounds that he was apparently the master of. And after sending him to the afterlife for good, seeing what his spectral furry friends did next was gut-wrenching. Poor spectral doggos. Oh my god. Baldur's Gate even manages to get me emotionally invested in characters that I've never seen and will never meet when it puts their fate in my hands.
As your mind connects, you feel yourself become strong, powerful, metal. You are a steel watcher, charging through the streets in pursuit of a young girl. She is screaming.
No, dude. Fuck, I've only got one more try.
For a split second, you wrest control. The steel watcher's legs lock. It crashes to the ground. The little girl disappears down an alley. Safe for now.
The emotional aspect of games like this is the only thing that keeps players genuinely invested in your narrative, and in so many instances it was unfortunately the case that they just didn't even do the bare minimum to make us give a fuck about what was going on in their story. Take this sequence, when we get attacked on our home turf for the first time by the big bad evil dude, what absolutely should have been one of the most tension-packed sequences in the entire game.
If my hands can stop shaking!
You do have a
Everyone
choice.
take cover, now. Where? You really expect them to barge through the front door? I'm not expecting them to ring the bell.
Is he just gonna teleport?
Could you all keep it down? I'm trying to work here.
Where are you going, Walter? Hey, talk to me. Fucking course, dude.
I'm almost done! Just a bit longer! That's the artifact! Ignore them. Focus. Focus.
Just hold them off. Once Noel has the artifacts, we run.
I mean, everybody has plot armor.
Don't stop! Keep going!
It appears the hunter is quite agile.
I mean, of course, nothing's actually coming. There might be a jump scare somewhere where, like, they come fucking... Holy Mother of God. Now, just in case you think that I'm arguing that you need great dialogue and voice acting and animations, I want to share a moment that stuck with me ever since I played what ended up becoming my new favorite game of all time, Outer Wilds, that manages to accomplish the same thing without any epic music, photorealistic facial animations, or spoken lines of dialogue. There were multiple moments like this where, even though I was trying to do something where time was of the essence, the game simply stopped me in my tracks and left me speechless. Now, I won't spoil anything. If you end up playing this game, I beg you not to watch anything that's going to spoil the experience for you. You really should go in blind. Just trust me. All I'm going to say to set the scene here is that I came across a message that somebody had written to the person they loved, somebody they reasonably thought they'd lost and would never see again, despite holding out hope that their worst fears weren't true. I'll never know if the music that plays in this moment was a coincidence or an intentional part of the game design, but either way, well, just watch. You can hear the other escape pod's distress signals, which gives me hopeful. You're still here. I'm unsure of how to survive in this place without you. I'm unsure how to be me without you. How does Starfield handle the moment when you finally discover the ultimate cause of the death of planet Earth, the birthplace of human civilization, and hear the final words of a man that single-handedly made that fateful decision that sealed its fate?
And if you're listening to this, then you probably already know the truth. But I have no reason to lie to anyone now, so I hope you'll accept this confession. Whoever you are. Human culture, art, music, lifestyles evolving and shining brightly across all of space. What price would I be willing to pay for that future? Maybe you don't believe me. Maybe Judith was right and I'm just a coward who wants to believe his mistakes were justified. But everyone has forgotten about the real origins of the grav drive, this artifact from Mars. I hope you make better use of it than I did.
Is there going to be like a revolver on the ground next to him with like 5 rounds chambered and 1 empty chamber? Nah, man, it's just mannequin.jpg on top of blood.jpg. He does have structural material in his pockets, though. No, I mean, that makes sense, right? Everything leading up to this big reveal moment, the reveal itself and what came right after were just chock full of missed opportunities to get us to feel something or to actually care about what was going on. This location and the story that's being told here are actually compelling, in theory. But the way they actually did it was just so anticlimactic. There was no crescendo, there was no buildup of tension. There were so many little moments within the larger scene that could have been super impactful with the right amount of environmental storytelling, or maybe with a little bit of music at the right time. Walking through this old, abandoned, dilapidated NASA facility, with all of the cool stuff on display, the decaying remnants of what was once a pillar of human scientific triumph, now as dead as the planet it lives on. This scene could have been so affecting. But all they did is just drop a couple of models of some ship parts and a couple of spacesuits, and just kind of hope that that would do the heavy lifting in terms of any kind of emotional impact. This was their moment to really pull at our heartstrings, and then right afterwards to make us feel the ultimate tension during this escape sequence. Now, I actually like that there's no music for at least part of when you come to the terminal right before the ultimate revelation. I think that was actually a really smart decision, or at least I would have if I thought that it was actually an explicit decision at all, given that this entire sequence didn't have any music playing at any point either. This is just one more example of something that I can't tell if it was either a terrible decision, an oversight, them being extremely lazy, or if the game is literally just bugged. I also very much feel like they missed the mark with what was seemingly the ultimate decision that the player is given to make in the story, because the decision doesn't ultimately have an impact on anything important in the world. You're just asked to choose between two arbitrary, oversimplified opinions about what somebody else did 100 years ago, something that already happened that you can't change. You don't have to make a decision about what to do. You have to make a decision about how you feel about something that's already been done. You're ultimately deciding which of these two assholes wins their petty argument. Or you can take neither side and the ending is just basically a little bit more annoying. And then there's also the fact that after you talk to these guys, they basically just say, well, okay, now you know the stakes. We'll let you go get the rest of the artifacts that we've been trying to keep you from getting the whole story, just so that we can have an epic showdown right there at the finale. Like, I've never before seen a story so obviously and blatantly set up the whole bad guy monologue right before getting taken down by the hero cliche. Like, holy shit. Now, I don't know if they were really trying to go for the whole white suit good guy, dark suit bad guy trope or what, but I really did find both of their arguments pretty weak. And in watching a lot of reviews and playthroughs from people who otherwise love the game, this feeling seems to be a fairly common one. Again, maybe this is just me, but I felt as if the choices they set up related to what to do with the artifacts at the end of the game just all seemed so uninspired. Actually, now that I think about it, it almost feels too inspired by everything going on today, everyone feeling the need to latch onto one absurd extreme or the other. Actually, the more I say this, the more I wonder if this game's story is some genius metaphor for the political— No. God damn it, no. They didn't think that hard about any of this. There are also a few elements of this that I'm not sure that many folks thought about, but that personally detracted from the weight of all this at the time. The first was that we've spent a bunch of time visiting far more hostile planets than this. Planets even like Mars, with no atmosphere or magnetosphere, where we mostly live underground. And yet Earth just mostly seems like a desert. It feels like it has far less inhospitable living conditions than many of the other places that we see humans colonizing perfectly fine. Like, the impact of basically killing the entire planet isn't really felt, at least for me, when we go out and it just feels like we're out in the Sahara Desert. And what's more is the other aspect of this. Basically that at no point are we told about anybody actually dying in this process, at least as far as I can remember. Like, it's not like we're told 7 billion people were left to die, that the ultimate decision was a trade-off between humans becoming an interstellar species and millions or even billions of lives. That's actually far more of an interesting and compelling thing to ponder. But instead, this whole thing falls completely flat because it all feels so far removed from any actual human cost. We basically see that Earth is a desert and we see a dead body, and that's it. It's not like we see piles of skeletons crawling all over each other, scrambling to get into the lifeboats into space. All we have is this vague, hypothetical, ethical question about what a guy did 100 years ago that we're asked to weigh in on. And that is what determines how we approach the ultimate ending of the game. Deciding whether or not to kill Paarthurnax towards the end of Skyrim was a far more difficult and emotional decision for me. And the environmental storytelling we get from this scene inside of a classroom in Outer Wilds says so much more than anything Starfield does, and Outer Wilds doesn't actually need to say anything at all to have the impact felt by anybody with a heart. Unfortunately, it gets worse. How about the final showdown of the entire game? The culmination of everything that came before it, the climax of the whole story, with the fate of a literal multiverse in your hands.
I want to hear this. Fine. Is that a note of concern? Live and let live. Is that right? Well, I don't know about either of you, but it's been a while since I felt this old. Perhaps it's time to put this all to an end.
It's really hard for me to believe that the people that tell me that my criticisms are unfair or unfounded actually played the game at all, or were even remotely paying attention during any of these moments. And if they were, do they really think that that's what we'd expect from a game that cost $400 million to make, that cost you $70, and that they spent over 7 years working on? I mean, even Diablo 4, a game that received exponentially more criticism than Starfield, went through the trouble of making a pretty damn epic cinematic leading up to the final boss fight. And the final boss fight itself was actually pretty sick. D4 is the most recent game that was hip to call a bad game. And even that game had music during the most important moments of the game. And it's not like Bethesda isn't capable of slapping together some cinematics at the bare minimum to make these moments remotely exciting. And that's why I'm just so utterly puzzled that people get so upset anytime anybody has remotely reasonable criticisms about the game, and how so many people say things like, this is our generation's Star Wars. Actually, unless they're talking about episode 1, then that actually might make sense. The moral of the story here is that we don't need AAA graphics, we don't need games to be perfectly bug-free, we don't need games built from billion-dollar budgets, they don't need the best voice actors in the business, or any voice actors for that matter. All game developers need to do is care enough to learn for themselves what we already know about what makes for truly great games, what makes for incredible stories, what makes the people that play their games feel something powerful, giving them the experiences that can literally change the way that we look at things. If they put all of that passion they've historically invested into marketing, into packing every possible half-baked feature they can think of into their games, and into meeting unreasonable deadlines, and instead put that blood, sweat, and tears towards the really meaningful details that matter, and learning how to properly tell a story, then we wouldn't have to have these kinds of discussions about where the quality bar for video games should be. But unfortunately, if we don't start holding developers to higher standards, truly remarkable games like Baldur's Gate 3 or Outer Wilds are going to continue to be anomalies, and that would be a shame. Now, if you made it this far in the video, I really appreciate your time. If you want to see more content like this, please share it with your friends and consider subbing to the channel. I'll leave you with the moments that followed right after the credits began to roll after my first playthrough of Outer Wilds, a game that everybody should play at least once. It fundamentally changed the way that I look at games and showed me what a game telling a great story is capable of. Something that I don't need to tell you about because I'd rather show you. Thanks for watching.